Brandenburg Gate is one of the most iconic landmarks in Europe, a symbol of Berlin, of Germany, and today, of unity. But for nearly 30 years, it stood in the shadow of a concrete barrier that divided not just a city, but an entire world: the Berlin Wall. From 1961 to 1989, the wall split Berlin into two realities: communist East Berlin and democratic West Berlin. On one side, a tightly controlled socialist state aligned with the Soviet Union. On the other, a Western enclave backed by the United States and its allies. For hundreds of people, that wall became a death sentence. On the evening of February 5th, 1989, two young East Berliners, Chris Gueffroy and Christian Gaudian, approached the border. Both worked side jobs in restaurants serving Western tourists. They had seen the difference firsthand, the contrast between life inside the Soviet system and life in the free world just a few hundred yards away. Chris was 20 years old, athletic, a trained gymnast. He believed he could make it over. The two friends managed to cross the inner perimeter of the heavily fortified border zone. What they didn't know was that they had triggered a silent alarm. Within minutes, East German border guards arrived and opened fire. Chris Gueffroy was shot and killed. He became the last person to die trying to escape over the Berlin Wall. Gaudian was wounded and arrested. In West Germany and across the Western world, the news sparked outrage. People asked a simple question: how, in 1989, in the middle of Europe, could soldiers still be ordered to shoot unarmed civilians and be praised for it? At the time, the wall seemed permanent, unbreakable, a concrete fact of life. But less than a year later, it would collapse. Not because of a single revolution, not because of one grand plan, but because of a chain reaction: economic failure, political miscalculations, rising public pressure, and a series of events so improbable they almost seem absurd in hindsight. To understand how it fell in a single night, we need to understand how it began. How the wall was born. After World War II, Germany was divided between the Allied powers. Berlin, though deep inside Soviet-controlled territory, was also split into sectors. That created a unique and dangerous situation. A Western democratic enclave sitting in the middle of the Soviet sphere of influence. For East Germany's communist leadership, aligned with Moscow, this was a problem. Between 1949 and 1961, approximately 3.5 million people, nearly 20% of East Germany's population, fled to the west. Many simply crossed through Berlin. The brain drain was catastrophic. In August 1961, the East German government erected what it officially called the Anti-Fascist Protection Barrier. The world called it the Berlin Wall. Concrete slabs, barbed wire, guard towers, floodlights, minefields, an elaborate death strip. Crossing it meant risking your life. Some tried anyway. One of the earliest defectors was 19-year-old border guard Konrad Schumann. Just days after construction began, he famously leapt over a barbed wire barrier into West Berlin, a moment captured in one of the Cold War's most iconic photographs. Others weren't so lucky. People dug tunnels, jumped from apartment windows facing West Berlin, crashed cars and even trains through checkpoints, flew homemade aircraft and hang gliders. Many were shot. Over its nearly 30-year existence, the wall claimed anywhere between 140 and over 1,000 lives, depending on how deaths are counted. And yet, by the late 1980s, something began to shift. the system starts to crack. For decades, East Germany had been presented as the showcase of socialism, the most stable and prosperous state in the Soviet bloc. But much of that stability had been propped up by financial support from Moscow. By the late 1980s, the Soviet Union itself was in crisis. Under Mikhail Gorbachev, reforms known as perestroika were reshaping the political landscape. Across Eastern Europe, communist regimes were weakening. Hungary moved first. On June 27, 1989, Hungarian and Austrian officials symbolically cut the barbed wire along their shared border. Soon after, Hungary began allowing free travel to Austria, and from there into Western Europe. This created an unexpected escape route. East Germans were allowed to travel to Hungary without major restrictions. Thousands vacationed there every year. In August 1989, during an event known as the Pan-European Picnic near the Hungarian town of Sopron, the border to Austria was temporarily opened. Hundreds of East Germans ran through. Hungarian authorities did not stop them. Soon, the trickle became a flood. By September, Hungary had officially opened its border to Austria. Within days, 15,000 East Germans fled. East German leader Erich Honecker, a hardline communist whose political career began in the Stalin era, was furious. Instead of reforming, he doubled down. He banned travel to Hungary. Refugees rerouted through Czechoslovakia and Poland, crowding West German embassies in Prague and Warsaw. Special trains eventually transported tens of thousands to West Germany. By October 1989, nearly 50,000 East Germans had left in a matter of weeks. The regime responded by sealing its borders. Even travel to other socialist countries now required special government approval. For ordinary East Germans, this was unprecedented, and it ignited protests. In cities like Dresden and Leipzig, demonstrations grew larger by the week. On October 7, 1989, the 40th anniversary of East Germany's founding, official celebrations in East Berlin turned into protests. Crowds chanted, "Perestroika," "Gorbachev, help us." In Leipzig, Monday prayer meetings at St. Nicholas Church evolved into mass demonstrations. The secret police, the Stasi, attempted intimidation and arrests. It didn't work. The crowds kept growing, and by early October, East Germany stood on the edge of something no one in the ruling party fully understood or could control. October 9th, 1989, the point of no return. 70,000 people flood the streets of Leipzig. The East German security forces are ready. Troops are deployed. Armored vehicles are on standby. Weapons are loaded. All they need is the order. It never comes. Erich Honecker instructs Egon Krenz, a senior party official, to handle the unrest. What Honecker doesn't realize is that Krenz has quietly been maneuvering to replace him. Crushing a peaceful protest would only strengthen Honecker. Letting it grow might finish him. A week later, 120,000 people march. The week after that, 320,000, nearly the entire adult population of Leipzig. And it's no longer just about travel restrictions. The chants shift. People demand political reform, economic reform, free elections. They want the dictatorship dismantled. October 18th, the fall of Honecker. The protests spread nationwide. The economy is deteriorating. The regime looks brittle. Honecker is forced out. The Soviet Union, the ultimate guarantor of East Germany's survival, refuses to intervene. Egon Krenz becomes the new leader of the German Democratic Republic. He represents a younger generation, but he is still a product of the same system, a loyal communist who climbed the party ladder by following ideology to the letter. The morning after taking power, Krenz flies to Moscow. He asks Mikhail Gorbachev for help. Publicly, Gorbachev expresses solidarity. Privately, he tells Krenz the truth. The Soviet Union has no money, no political will, and no appetite to send tanks into East Berlin. The message is clear: you're on your own. November 4th, 1 million people. If removing Honecker was meant to calm the streets, it failed. On November 4th, nearly 1 million people gather at Alexanderplatz in East Berlin, the largest protest in East German history. This time, the regime doesn't try to stop it. In a surreal twist, state television broadcasts the rally live. It's no longer possible to pretend nothing is happening. Günter Schabowski, a Politburo member and head of the party in Berlin, attempts to address the crowd. He's met with boos. The public no longer trusts the leadership. The regime senses it must offer something, anything, to regain control. November 6th, a desperate concession. Under mounting pressure, the Communist Party drafts a new law on foreign travel. The proposal is published the same day. It's a mess. Citizens would still have to apply for travel permits. Approval could take up to 30 days. Requests could be denied without explanation. It's reform in name only. The protesters see through it immediately. At rallies, a new chant emerges. We don't want this law. We want the wall gone. For the first time, the unthinkable is spoken openly. Not reform, not modification, but removal. The Berlin Wall, the defining symbol of the Cold War, is now openly challenged. November 9th, 1989, morning. Inside a government office in East Berlin, a small task force works on yet another revision to travel regulations. The group is led by Gerhard Lauter, a mid-level Interior Ministry official. The new draft is short, just 3 clauses. Travel applications remain technically required, but the criteria are relaxed so dramatically that approval is almost guaranteed. And crucially, the draft allows East Germans to leave through Berlin Wall checkpoints. Then someone adds a phrase that will change history, effective immediately. The intent is administrative, to signal urgency. The plan is for the rule to take effect the next day, November 10th, accompanied by a carefully worded press release. Lauter forwards the draft to his superiors and leaves work satisfied. That evening, he and his wife plan to attend a theatre performance. He has no idea that within hours, his bureaucratic language will help bring down the regime. November 9th, 3:37 p.m. The Central Committee reviews the draft. The discussion lasts less than 30 minutes. A few minor edits, a handful of trivial questions. Then they move on to other agenda items. None of them grasp the magnitude of what they've just approved. November 9th, 6 p.m. Günter Schabowski steps up to the podium for a live press conference. 4 days earlier, he had been booed by a crowd of 1 million. The day before, he had been appointed the party's new spokesman. Minutes before the conference begins, Egon Krenz hands him the text of the new travel regulation. Schabowski barely reads it. He assumes it's routine. The press conference is broadcast live on East German television and radio. It is, by all accounts, dull, until 6:53 p.m. With just minutes left, an Italian journalist raises his hand. He asks whether the controversial November 6th travel proposal had been a mistake. Schabowski rambles. Then he casually mentions there is a new regulation. He fumbles through his papers and begins reading aloud. East German citizens, he says, may now travel abroad without needing to justify their reasons. The room freezes. A reporter asks the obvious follow-up. When does this regulation take effect? November 9th, 1989, 6:53 p.m. The document clearly states that a formal press release is scheduled for November 10th. The intention is simple. Starting tomorrow, East German citizens may apply for travel visas under relaxed rules. But Günter Schabowski doesn't know that. As he flips through the unfamiliar text during a live press conference, his eyes land on two words in Clause 2. Ab sofort. Effective immediately. A journalist presses him. Does this include travel to West Berlin? Schabowski hesitates. He doesn't fully understand the document. West Berlin is mentioned only in the context of permanent departure, but without pausing, he replies, yes, that includes West Berlin as well. 7:04 p.m. The Spark reporters don't have copies of the decree. They rely entirely on Schabowski's words. Within minutes, the message flashes across global news wires. East Germany opens its borders, effective immediately. At 7:04 p.m., the West German news agency DPA reports that East Germans may now cross freely into West Germany. Reuters and the Associated Press repeat it. The world hears it before the East German government fully understands what just happened. 7:17 p.m., it goes public. West German television breaks the story during prime time. Millions of East Germans are watching. For years, they trusted Western broadcasts more than their own state-controlled media. Now they're hearing something extraordinary. The wall is open. The news spreads like wildfire. 7:30 p.m., Bornholmer Strasse. At the Bornholmer Strasse checkpoint, the evening shift is led by Lieutenant Colonel Harald Jäger of the Stasi. He helped build the wall in 1961 as a young soldier. He truly believed it protected peace in Europe. Now he watches the press conference in disbelief. He calls his superior for instructions. The answer? No one knows anything. 7:45 p.m., the crowd gathers. East Berliners begin arriving at the checkpoints. They demand passage, citing Schabowski's statement. At Bornholmer Strasse, about 100 people show up, already more than the guards on duty. Then hundreds, then thousands. The guards push people back. At other crossings, water cannons are prepared. No one leaves. From both sides of the wall, people chant, "Open the gate." 8 p.m. Confusion. Police try to redirect the crowd, telling them to obtain visas at a nearby station. But the station is closed. No one is issuing documents. The crowd grows angrier and larger. 9:30 p.m. On the brink, tens of thousands now press against the checkpoints. The border guards follow standing orders. Prevent illegal crossings at all costs. For nearly 30 years, that included deadly force. Berlin stands on the edge of bloodshed, but no commander is willing to give the order to fire on an unarmed crowd. The regime is paralyzed. 10:30 p.m., the first crack Jäger keeps calling his superiors. No clear instructions come. Finally, he's told to let a few of the most persistent people through, quietly. No stamps, no warnings that they cannot return, just let them go. But that creates chaos. Some who cross into West Berlin simply walk around the block and try to come back to their families. Now Jäger faces a choice: follow orders or follow reality. He lets them back in. He has just violated protocol. 11:30 p.m., the breaking point. Jäger calls headquarters again. He describes a critical situation spiraling out of control. Instead of guidance, he receives insults. a senior official accuses him of cowardice. After decades of loyal service, Jaeger feels abandoned, humiliated, left alone to make a decision that could change history. For decades, Harold Jaeger had served the regime. He helped build the wall in 1961. He believed in it. He enforced it. But now, faced with a crisis he didn't create and orders that never came, he was abandoned by the very system he'd defended. Instead of guidance, he got insults. Jaeger slammed down the phone. Then he walked outside and gave the order, lift the barrier. The man who once helped build the Berlin Wall had just begun dismantling it. November 10th, 1989, 12 a.m. one checkpoint opens, then another and another. The Politburo had only meant to slightly ease travel restrictions. Instead, the border disappears. Thousands of East Germans flood into West Berlin. Strangers embrace in the streets. Champagne bottles pop. Bars hand out free beer. West Berlin banks distribute the traditional welcome money, 100 Deutsche Marks per visitor. For many East Germans, it's their first taste of the West. It's a night no one will sleep through. 1:30 a.m. on top of history. People begin climbing the wall. Just hours earlier, that could have meant death. Now they sit on top of one of the most heavily guarded barriers in the world, hugging, laughing, singing. Some start chipping away at it with hammers and chisels. By sunrise, makeshift openings appear along the concrete scar that once divided Europe. Even the Glienicke Bridge, once used for Cold War spy swaps between the US and the Soviet Union, fills with ordinary citizens simply crossing over. The world reacts. No global leader saw it coming. West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl rushed home from Poland. President George H.W. Bush watched events unfold live on television. In Moscow, even Mikhail Gorbachev wasn't informed immediately. When he finally learned what had happened, his reaction was restrained. In his memoirs, he later wrote, "I accepted it as a fact." The aftershock. Over the next few days, millions of East Germans crossed into the West. McDonald's, electronics stores, supermarkets, places once distant symbols of capitalism, were suddenly within reach. But the wall did not disappear overnight. Border procedures were temporarily restored. The future of Germany remained uncertain. Many European leaders were uneasy about reunification. British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher and French President François Mitterrand both privately expressed deep concern about a united Germany. Even the Soviet Union initially resisted, but economic realities spoke louder than ideology. In March 1990, East Germany held its first free elections. Communist rule ended. On October 3, 1990, Germany was officially reunified. Berlin was whole again. Epilogue. Today, only fragments of the Berlin Wall remain. Tourists buy small pieces of concrete as souvenirs. But one memorial stands where Chris Gueffroy was shot in February 1989, the last person killed trying to escape. He believed the wall would stand forever. Many did. For decades, the regime seemed unbreakable. But history doesn't collapse slowly. Sometimes it shatters in a single night because of confusion, miscommunication, hesitation, and because ordinary people decide they are no longer afraid. When the moment came, East Germans seized it, and no barrier on earth could stop them.